At the moment I was abandoned. I thought I would sink into despair forever. But in my hopelessness, I found strength and became a powerful alpha. Now I will lead my pack to retaliate against those who once looked down on me, proving I am not a worthless failure. Chapter 24. Fixing families. The heavily crowded room made me feel claustrophobic. The heavy scent of men's cologne, mud, water and overall sweat made the room feel even worse, making my head slightly spin and my breaths to slightly increase. There were other women in the room like Jenny and a couple of warriors, but the room was mainly dominated by the male wolf, the scents in the air proving that fact. We were all crowded in the meeting room, or whatever you want to call it. A huge table lay in the center of the room, a large map of our territory and the territory of Moonrise marked with marker scribblings and notes laying around the table as our plans were thought out thoroughly. Our TTC was to work with the wind, the plan being figured out on the day, so as we walked in the wind it would hopefully blow away our scents and disguising our trail, so they had no chance of finding us, giving my army the element of surprise. But what if there is no wind on the day? This plan will fail. Arva, you can't seriously go through with this. Nathan screamed at me, slamming both his fists in the hardwood mahogany table. I glanced up to him, my alpha instinct not liking being attacked, were told I would fail even if it was from my beta. You should understand at best to not doubt your leader. I spent 18 years of my fucking life at the place staying with that bastard of an alpha day in and day out. So if you think there's someone much more capable of doing my fucking job, be my guest. The door's over there. I screamed out to Nathan, my hand gesturing all over the place just to prove my point. Ever since that day I talked to Jack and Matilda, my nerves and emotions had been going through the roof. They were still here, which is what pissed me off, and Jenny had been so different since she had seen her brother, since being kicked out of her home. I had both my hands on the table, breathing in and out very deeply, trying to calm my nerves the best I could. My ears were twitching all over the place, picking up snide comments and whispers amongst warriors and trackers as I attempted to calm myself down. I looked up as I heard my name. At the door stood Jack and Matilda, and I could feel Jenny pressing more into my side at the sight of that disgusting couple. You could see it on Jack's face how much it hurt him to lose his little sister from his actions. But I felt no sympathy for that bastard. What do you want? I growled out the corner of my mouth, picking up in a snarl as I watched the pair closely. Jack flinched back from my power and Matilda visibly cowered away. We wanted to ask you of a favor. Alone. I growled to the pair again, but nodded nonetheless. Can I come? Jenny asked, hopefully her eyes sparkling with innocence even if she lost that part of her mind years ago. I softly smiled down at her. Of course, sis. Let's go. I smirked as I called her sis, knowing that it would piss Jack off more. I was proven correct when his eyes turned a slight tint of gold, his mouth formed in a snarl, but thinking better of it, and turning his face neutral. The rest of you may continue planning or take a break. I told everyone, and most people breathed a sigh of relief leaving with their friends or mates. It brought a pang to my heart, but I didn't let it show. This way. I told Jack and Matilda while I held Jenny's hand firmly in mine, my tail wrapped around her waist in my ears, checking to see if any danger was nearby. I walked out of the exit of the room, Jack and Matilda staying close behind while Jenny stuck to me. I immediately took them to my crappy office, even if it couldn't be defined that I still did whatever work or planned on things in here, and it turned into a kind of safe place for me. I jumped into the office chair, Jenny planting her butt straight on my lap, where Jack and Matilda stood on nervous feet as they watched us. So what needed to be discussed, but it caused you to disturb our planning and needed to be requested alone? I softly asked as I wrapped my arms around Jenny's waist, bringing her impossibly closer. The feeling she brought me absolutely amazing. We wanted to request if we could stay. Jack asked timidly, showing me his neck of a few moments in a way that was submissive. May I ask for a reason? I asked them smugly as Jenny began to feel the thick tension that was building in the air that caused her to squirm. In all honesty, I didn't really care, and my ears were only focusing on Jen's soft breathing as she snuggled in closer to me. Jack sighed softly and Matilda rubbed his back while he did in a sort of comforting gesture. My heart pang yet again seeing this transaction between two mates. It's just that I never got to explain myself before you knocked me out, and I've been trying to build the courage to tell you what happened. My ear twitched in his direction as I suddenly became interested in what he was saying. Tell me then. What? Jack asked, probably thinking I would have another fit about this whole situation. I was honestly ready to claw his eyeballs out and shut them up his ass as he watched me claw out his insides, so they became his outsides. But Jenny was here calming me, and I knew it would deeply disturb her if she watched me kill her brother, even if he was a douche. What's your sad story that caused you to rue in the prime years of Jenny's life? That honestly hurt me to say, and Jenny shook with her knees and I instantly felt guilty. But I was glad I did it as I watched Jack cower back, his eyes filled with regret and sadness. I was lucky that on my birthday our parents, being idiots, completely forgot it because Bethany, our older sister, was apparently more special at one of her private nettable matches that they thought I would be fine to spend my birthday alone. Jenny was also at a friend's house, so I was alone. Meaning I shifted alone. Knowing that my parents would hate me and never love me again, I kept it to myself and taught myself about werewolves and shit. There was a very long pause that made the uneasiness and tension in the air times by 1,000,000,000. So when it was Jenny's birthday and she shifted, I couldn't believe my eyes. I wasn't the only one. But knowing if I began showering her in kisses and hugging her and telling her everything would be alright, my parents would know that I had something to do with this or was also a werewolf, so I ignored it. I ignored everything they did to her. It broke my heart when they ended up kicking her out of our home, and I was so mad that about an hour later, after she left, I began to search for her with no avail. But I found Matilda. As he spoke her name, she smiled softly up at him and he smiled back. The love the two shared clearly visible. She taught me about mates, packs and rogues in general. So we began to search together for Jenny. That we stumbled on a pack's territory, and in my rage of them, petting my angel, I told her to run and killed the group. I was shocked to say the least. A werewolf all by himself defeated most likely a large group of pack warriors attacking him. He wasn't trained and didn't know anything, yet he did it. I nodded my head to continue. Then after I defeated them all, I went looking for Tilly. That's when I found her almost dead in front of you. You know the rest of the story. I brought my ears back as I remembered that moment. It's embarrassing to say the least and frightening that I lost control like that. Jenny suddenly looked at me with a small glare that rose a blush to my face. When was it the last time you fed? She asked me, her small brown eyes staring accusingly at me. 3 days. I told her, scratching the back of my head awkwardly as she glared at me. My plan was really to wait until my hunger took control of my body and then feed off any animals nearby and make sure I didn't hurt any of my pack members while drinking as little blood as possible. But by the way Jen was glaring at me, I knew I was in trouble. What? Go out there and find something now before you have another craving or panic attack. She yelled at me roughly, pointing at me rest then at the door as a signal to get a mover along. Jenny, after I finished with Jack and Matilda, alright. I gave her a soft kiss on the forehead as a signal the discussion was over, and she stomped out of the room with her arms over her chest and steam most likely coming out of her ears. I chuckled softly as I watched her slam the door shut, her actions seeming so much like her. It made me happy. She's like my mum sometimes, yet she's for years younger than me. I laughed to myself softly. Turning back to Jack and Matilda, I watched as their body language was small and submissive. Clearly Jack was saying the truth. You can stay. I sighed and I watched as instantly Jack was happy and smiling brightly, and Matilda followed Jack's actions, obviously seeing that Jack was happy made her happy. Yet another pang to the heart. On one condition. I told them softly, my finger pointing to the roof so they knew to shut up and listen to me. They obliged. Before you can stay, Jen needs to feel comfortable with your presence. Right now it's as if you guys being here is squeezing the life out of her. I didn't know how to put it lightly, but I at least knew that this way they know the full extent of what would happen if they didn't follow the orders. Jack rubbed the back of his neck. Obviously a lot of tension and stress has put a lot of pressure on his body. I know, but she's heard the story, but I don't think I get it up to her. She's changed here. I titled my head to the side in confusion. How has she changed? I questioned. At home she was always quiet and shy, even before our family started to reject her. She was so quiet when the torment and abuse began, but now she has opened up so much to you. She never did that for me. He mumbled lowly. It's mainly because of the protector bond. We both know that we are safe in each other's presence. I know I would have been 6 feet under if it weren't for her in this pact, I said with a slight uneasiness, with a small laugh on the end, the tension slightly loosening. How so? Matilda asked, and I stared up at her, my ears slightly drawn back, memories and pain flashing through my mind. My life wasn't all peachy before this. I don't want to talk about it. I told her slowly, and she got the message as she shut her mouth and downcast her eyes. So what has Jenny been through before you found her? I know you've only known her for around a month, so but about the other 2 years. Jack asked me suddenly, his eyes slightly pleading. She doesn't like to talk about it. No one does. I told them truthfully. I could see the confusion written on their faces, so I went on to explain. The alpha before me was cruel and harmful, his sole purpose revenge and power for an unknown reason. So he was obviously mean to all his pack members. But whenever I asked Matilda about it, she would shut down. I only learnt his name. I laughed at the memory of when she told me his name and our hysterical laughter. Matilda and Jack gave me weird looks, but I ignored it and continued my story. Even my bait and Dathan would give me brief information about him, mainly of his rough training methods and days without sleep or food. I'm glad I've made their lives at least slightly happier. I smiled at the happy thoughts and words that I hear from my pack members every day as they ran through my mind. I'm such a dick, Jack suddenly exclaimed, Matilda immediately trying to talk him out of it. I scoffed, you kind of are. It made both Matilda and Jack with me a set of playful yet angry glares on me, but I continued with what I was saying anyway. But you can't try to make a brighter future for her. You can't fix the past, so try to fix her unknown future that isn't looking too bright. I told him truthfully, and I got a bright smile from him and his mate. Thank you, he told me, and quickly pecked Matilda on the forehead before running out of the room. I was about to get up and follow them to make sure Jen was okay, but thought better of as I realized they would both most likely want privacy. It pained me to sit back on that chair, but I slowly did, my ears drawn back and tail curled around me. Now the situation gets awkward. Matilda was looking at me with a kind of confused and uncertain expression as I wore the same. I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do now. She breathed with a breath of laughter, trying to make me smile, and for the sake of it, I gave her a tight once so she didn't feel uncomfortable. I need to go for a hunt, so you can try and find your mate. Join me on my hunt, or maybe help some of the chefs and pack wolves in the kitchen. I think I'll just join the other wolves if that's all right. I'm more of an utter fighter. I smiled at that. Okay. I need to go before my cravings come back, but I'm sure you'll be able to find your mate or someone from the pack to help you to the kitchen. If anything happens. Scream. She seemed wary as I spoke to her, but the fact was this was a rogue pack, meaning there was a lot of unmated male wolves that would jump on an opportunity any chance they got. I usually kick them out if they try anything. Okay, why? Matilda said, and I guided her outside my office before locking the door behind me. She may have just joined this pack and have a loving mate and everything she could ask for. But this girl had something off about her. I'll see you at the next meeting or at dinner. I smiled and ran down the halls of concrete and white tiles. The familiar smiles of pack members warmed my heart as they told me things like, "Hey Ive, how's it going?" Or, "Have a good day." I would usually respond with a simple nod or a "good" before continuing down the hall. It made me smile broadly. I quickly bursted out of the hideout, a smile on my face. My tail shook with happiness being outside again after spending hours in that cramped room. My ears even began on their own accord to listen to the sounds of nature as bushes rustled and animals ran around. Then I ran into the forest as I listened for my prey. The plans were almost done, and I knew that my pack would likely win the battle, with maybe a chance of 75 of us winning and 25 chance of us into those bastards. Watch out, Aiden. I'm coming sooner than expected. Chapter 25, The Hunt. The afternoon now sent a slight chill down my spine. Looking up, I watched as countless clouds rolled by. The sound of thunder going off in the distance as a reminder of a storm that was rolling in. Good. I ran through the dense forest as I was forced to dodge countless branches and to have to jump over fallen trees and random shrubs that littered the soft ground. My feet sprinted across the earth, my hair blowing in the wind, my ears twitching and scanning the forest for noise as my tail wiggled and turned with every step I took deeper into the dark forest. The feeling I felt as I ran was pure bliss, and my wolf side of me was howling in happiness. I took a sprinting start and bounded into a tree, bouncing from branch to branch. The branches and sticks flew past me as I bounded through the leaves. The obvious small scratches that I would obtain from a couple of small twigs didn't even fall to my good mood. The lowering sun shimmered through the branches, the rays of light showing off the small droplets of water that began falling from the sky. Reaching my desired branch, I settled for an oak's branch that was relatively close to the ground, yet high enough that creatures or people wouldn't be able to spot me. I landed softly on the secure branch, the bark making a slight cracking noise under the pressure of my weight. The oak was placed on the outskirts of a large grass field, a couple of other small trees and shrubs littering the sides. But this oak was the largest in closet to the meadow. Gazing out, the field was filled with tall green grass and tall flowers ranging from all colors. Bugs flew from plant to plant and birds were chirping and swooping for the tiny creatures. What caught my attention wasn't the small birds or bugs though. It was the large group of deer and bucks grazing in the large open space. The sight was absolutely magical, the soft drizzle of rain making this seem like this scene was something out of a movie or documentary. As stealthy as a cat, I slithered down the tree, making sure that I kept my body low and out of sight from the deer. My feet planted with the most tiny of noises, my hands making sure I lessened the impact of the fall. Instead of getting up all fours, I began crawling along the ground and into the open field. My body stayed lower than the tall grass and that I avoided all the tiny twigs or leaves that had spread themselves across the ground. I kept softly among the leaves. The smell of soft mud and new grass was tantalizing. I softly growled in anticipation of a newly caught heel, the thought of it down my spine, shaking my tail softly through the grass. My ears twitched with the sound of new footsteps, and this tiny growl ran through my chest in anger. The buck out there is pretty neat. How old do you think? Is 15 or 20 years old? A man softly chuckled to himself. Probably 25, even he looks ancient. Better put him in his grave earlier than he planned. The click of a safety being turned off of a gun made my instincts on high alert. I kept close to the ground, but this time I slowly made it tore around the deer and towards the sound of those men's heartbeat. Their talking was unbelievably loud, and I'm surprised the deer hadn't ran off yet from the noise. But knowing deer, they aren't the smartest animals, so I wouldn't be surprised if they ended up walking right in front of the barrel of the sniper rifle that is currently being loaded and ready for fire. Soon enough, I was about 3 meters away from those men's placements. They were chuckling and mumbling things about their wives and this hunting trip they were taking. It honestly brought a sour taste to my mouth at how much they seemed to loathe their wives and families. I quietly sniffed the air, checking to see if they were as supernatural or not. Their sets turned out to be that of a human's, and I froze. This is truly my first encounter with a human. They seemed disgusting. The way they talk about their soul's mates with utter disgust, and how they talk about their kids as if they were dirt, makes me wonder why they would feel such ways. To a werewolf family is life, and the parents would literally trade their own life for that of their pups' lives. A male werewolf would jump in front of a bullet to save his mate. So why do humans hate their families? We'll never know. The gun clicked once more. Got an eye shot. Shut up. A man suddenly angrily mumbled to the other, his heartbeat quickening as he readied himself to kill an innocent buck. I growled loudly now, and I heard as their heartbeats fastened a dramatic rate as they heard it. Shit. You checked for wolves, right? He exclaimed, talking to the gun, who I believe was handling the gun. Don't worry, I'm an excellent shot. They come even close to us, it's a death sentence. I rolled my eyes at the human's cockiness. Just stay quiet till I kill this buck. It will make us rich, he told the other man quietly but with a slight chuckle on the end. I pounced. I jumped out of where I was hidden in the grass and thankfully landed right in front of where that man was going to take a shot. The men seemed petrified, and it honestly built up my ego a whole bunch. The man on the left was significantly larger than the other man. His eyes are dark brown, and his hair a graying version of his eyes. The man on the right had a skinny figure. He looked as if he had never even handled a gun before. His eyes were a bright green and his hair brown with the same graying highlights as the other man's hair. Other than the eyes and their body types, they could be passed off as twins. Shit. The green-eyed man exclaimed, his hands loosing hold of the gun as the sniper rifle fell to the floor. The brown-eyed man fell back, clawing at the mud in an attempt to get away. You should be quiet, I told the cowering men quietly, my index finger placed over my lips as I let out a tiny shit at the end of my sentence. What the fuck are you? The green-eyed man screamed at me, pointing an accusing finger my way. I raised an eyebrow his way as I watched his thin fingers scan the ground for his fallen rifle as he kept his eyes trained on mine. The man on left was clutching his chest as he struggled for breath. I felt slightly bad for his most likely asthma or panic attack that was caused by me. I'm a hybrid. I told them matter-of-factly as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. Their eyes grew even wider as they heard my reply, but tell they had more questions hidden underneath the thick layer of fear. Watching the young man scramble for the gun again, I gave him a sidelong glance that he seemed to ignore as he kept his sights on the sniper rifle laying on the ground. My smile grew wide and sick as I lifted my booted foot and planted it right on top of the gun where his hand has just gripped the barrel. The bones in his hand shattered into millions of pieces as the gun snapped in half, the sound of metal and bones breaking echoing throughout the forest. The man screeched at the top of his lungs as he attempted to get his hand out from underneath my boot. "Whoops. I'm sorry, you're not allowed to leave yet." I growled out to the young man, pushing my boot further into the ground so his hands broke again and again. He screamed again, a scream leaving his lips as he tried to bite his tongue and try to make himself look more manly. "Now stay still." As I grabbed his hair and pulled his body up in front of me, taking my boot of his hand. He cupped his destroyed hand to his chest as tears built up in his eyes. I leaned into the man, putting my lips right next to his ear. "Don't move," I whispered breathlessly into his ear as I penetrated the skin of his neck and draining the blood from his body. He struggled under my rough grit, but I kept an arm firmly around his chest, making sure he didn't move the slightest. Dropping the dead corpse to the floor, it looked like a deflated whoops cushion. I felt sick with myself just looking at his dead eyes. I roughly wiped the excess blood off the sides of my mouth. Looking back over to the fat man, I realized he was already dead. He had fallen to the ground, his hands scratching at his heart as he most likely died of a heart or panic attack. I drew my ears back just looking at him, not liking the way his eyes stared dead ahead, not focusing on anything. His mouth forming a silent scream. My ears were drawn atop my head and my tail stayed tucked in between my legs. Even my wolf side didn't like what I did. But one part of me screamed in joy as the quench for blood was satisfied once again. Looking back one last time at the scene I made a mad dash away from the field. Deer and dead bodies, the dead look in their eyes replaying in my mind every second. Chapter 26, Final Plan. After coming back from my hunt, I was still slightly disgusted with myself. The only reason being that I did it was how Jenny told me to. And defying an order from her is like telling Satan he can't have my soul. Then there's also the fact that I had to still lead my pack into battle and clench my thirst for revenge so I can go to that beach and finish what I started in peace. "Get into the meeting hall now, please." I sent through the pack link as I continuously rubbed my temple and eyes, trying to soothe the headache and nauseous feeling that has overcome me. As soon as I had sent it, everyone bursted out of their rooms and stopped what they were doing, running to the meeting hall in a rush as if I was going to punish them if they were even a second late. That made a fire of rage ignite inside me as I realized the reason of my pack members' unease and tension. It was that stupid alpha that had done this to them. Showed them no kindness, no loyalty, no trust. In this place it was a kill or be killed bone, and that thought brought a wave of anger over me. I growled loudly as I began storming towards the meeting hall, my rage not dying down anytime soon. Once in that concrete hall, everyone had already filled the couple of chairs littered around the rooms or stood around with mates by their side or whispering with friends at the sight of the usually calm leader storming into the meeting room. At the corner of my eye saw Jenny standing alongside Jack and Matilda, even though you could see the unease in her eyes and the tension in her shoulders. She seemed a little lighter at the thought of having her family member back. Nathan stood at the head of the table alongside with Dominic, which I have learnt was the third in command before the alpha died at the hands of me. Nathan gave me a raised eyebrow, the question he's already going to ask me obvious. "Why you so mad?" Nathan asked me through the mind link and I glared at him. "A lot of reasons," I replied to him in a monotone voice. I had by now reached the end of the huge circular table, the whole room going silent and everyone growing tense as they watched me closely. I leaned against the wooden tabletop, making sure that I didn't look anyone in the eye as I made my decision final. My tail was tense and my ears were ready to hear the complaints almost everyone would have. "We attack tonight." I dropped the bombshell, instantly showing that I was utterly serious with my decision. A series of gasps and protests erupted around the room, everyone having at least a billion reasons why we shouldn't attack tonight and wait. This went on for a while, with Mesa and Dominic both trying to get me out of my decision. their protests and whinny voices making me annoyed quickly as they made wild hand gestures around me. I stood up straight and my hands clenched at my sides, my ears and tail twitching in annoyance as I watched everyone bicker and argue around me. Using the anger inside me to fuel my decision, I slammed both my fists on the table, quickly silencing the room in an instant. I know what you are all saying, but my decision is final. I have much faith in my pack and I know we will defeat the enemy. I'm sorry to everyone that this affect. Ava, you can't let my girl go. Turning to where I heard the voice, I saw a man in his late 20s, his hair disheveled and eyes fixated in horror as they stared into mine. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I swear to God, if you, please Ava, Fiona bears my child. The gasps erupted around the room with Fiona turning a deep shade of red. Her arms wounding around her lower stomach, her eyes downcast. Is this true, Fiona? I asked her calmly. Most of the pack seemed tense as I addressed her, and Fiona seemed petrified at what I was about to say. Yes, Eva. She replied monotone, half her face stuffed inside Kyle's chest as she gave me sidelong glances. My wolf side of me growled loudly as she showed us so much disrespect my wolf was ready to rip her throat out. But I simply replied with a soft smile. Of course you can stay. But Kyle, I request you make a decision to either stay with your mate or come with us onto the battlefield. The choice is yours. I smiled warmly at the couple, my heart breaking as I watched the exchange, their eyes glazed over mine, linking their decisions. In the middle of their conversation, Fiona gave Kyle a glare as he returned her glare with a comforting look. I'll join you in battle. I smiled at Kyle's bravery as Fiona seemed to dislike his choice. But it was not hers to make, and I was glad. He will be joining us in battle. Anything else of importance that needs to be addressed, you can complain in my office. For now, I want people to begin to say their goodbyes and make sure that top health. That is all. Problems will be brought to either Dominic, Nathan or I. Thank you for your time, and I'm sorry that this happened so early. I want this fight over. The sooner the better. Then this pack can enjoy its newfound land. A boy older than Jenny but younger than me amongst the crowd raised a weary arm, his weary limbs shaking in what seemed like fear. Yes, I replied, placing my butt on the table so I didn't have to stand anymore. You make it sound as if you're not going to be with us. People nodded their heads around the room, and it brought a pain to my heart. I won't be with you, that is true. Gasps filled the room, and it brought an even bigger pang to my heart. We need an alpha. Someone yelled in the crowd, and I drew my ears back in shame. Nathan will fill the position with Dominic taking the beta, with a new gamma in place. You guys don't need me. I replied monotone up from the table. What's gonna happen to you? I glanced back up at the group, my ears still drawn back with my tail slack behind me. Tell them, Ava. I turned around as I saw Jenny, her brown eyes boring into mine with hatred and sadness clear as day represented in those dark orbs. Her arms crossed over her chest, her hair falling down her small frame in a wavy way. Tell them why the alpha has to leave. She screamed to me, her finger pointing accusingly at me. The crowd grew weary, knowing something big was going to happen and a big secret would be spilled. The small talk and whispers raced around the room, and I glanced at Nathan for help. It's only fair, he replied sadly to me, and that's what I knew. I had to come out with it. Jumping off the table and standing next to Nathan, I used his body heat and familiar smell to calm me down. I looked out into the crowd, my anxiety ripping at my chest as if it was a raging forest fire that couldn't be tamed. Everyone was watching me, closely watching and waiting for my next move. I felt so intimidated by their presence, each set of eyes more curious than the last. I need to finish something that I started the first night I got out of my old pack's territory. I told them honestly. It was the truth. I just didn't tell them what I would do when I made it back to that beach. Looking around, I caught on to Jenny's stare, which burnt a hole straight through my eyes. She looked at me with a slight annoyance in her brown orbs, probably from not telling the actual truth. But a little bit of pride twinkled amongst the annoyance, since I technically did tell them the truth. I looked to Nathan beside me as he gave me a kind and soft smile that warmed my insides. He wrapped an arm around my shoulders and brought me closer into his shoulder as he rubbed up and down my arm in a side-on hug. It was oddly beautiful. Gazing out into the crowd, I watched Dominic looking anywhere Mostly my ears that continued to twitch during this entire exchange. Jack and Matilda looked at me confused. Jack's arm was firmly placed around Matilda's waist as he brought her impossibly closer, like my side-on hug with Nathan right now. I saw Sapphire, the nurse from an earlier chapter, studying a clipboard as she kept glancing up at me, her blue eyes twinkling. This whole situation in general was utterly nerve-wracking. Clearing my throat awkwardly, I slid myself expertly out of Nathan's grasp, not meeting his eyes all the while as I brushed myself down of invisible dust. Gazing back out into the crowd, everyone still had their eyes trained on my every movement, their eyes following me like a hawk watching for its prey. Start packing. And with that, I exited the conference room with my head down, my tail swishing behind me as I made my hasty escape. Chapter 27 Pre-Battle. I stood underneath the jet of the shower facing the oncoming jets of scorching water as a soft smile played on my lips. The fast droplets of water ended on my face and across my chest, making my hair wet with the fluff of my ears damp as I ran my hands, only rubbing in the soothing feeling of the water on my skin, making me feel clean once again. Lifting my hands on top of my head, I ran my fingers through the many tangles and knots that had overcome my hair, the stopping and starting feeling getting on my nerves after a while. My tail swung side to side and beat with my movements as I began to hum quietly the tune to the song I Hate You, I Love You video above. The feeling of the song and the words replaying over and over again in my head had my body feeling a mixture of emotions. The main one, rage. It was the only emotion that I had left in my body. I'm not trying to be dramatic, but it's just the way I feel inside. I've been so powerless against everything that's been thrown at me in life. I am a hybrid between a vampire and werewolf, with my hidden vampire abilities still unknown, but the fact remains that even with all my power and training, I'm still powerless against so many challenges I've faced, and it makes me feel powerless. Looking down at my body, I looked at each individual scar that I could see on the front of my body, each one more different than the one before it, a different tale and cause for each little wound that had turned into a faded pink line on my body. Supernaturals can't scar easily. The fast healing and powers that many supernaturals possess makes it so most wounds that could be fatal to a human be a scratch to a supernatural being. But most times that I had been either tortured or attacked, my attackers always seemed to have silver on them, which made my skin burn and sizzle each time it made contact. I guess I was lucky though in a way. I wasn't a full werewolf, so I wouldn't feel the full extent of the pain that a pure-blood werewolf may feel. I looked at my wrists next, tiny lines that could barely even be seen littered across the veins that could be seen. I wished for death, so I was hoping that by cutting on a vein I would eventually bleed to death. I was unlucky in my wish, but I still continued to do it. But when I continued to think it over in my head each time I did self-harm, the last time I did it was back on that beach where everything to have started. I found my mate. My mate rejected me. I killed a rogue leader. I'm in charge of a rogue pack. And soon I was meant to attack Moonrise and get revenge on Alphaden. What a fucked up couple of weeks it's truly been for me, but I was glad it happened. I've seen more of this outside world than I ever had the chance to in Moonrise, and even if many shit things happen while I was out, I'm still holding on to what the Moon Goddess said to me. Things will only get worse before they get better, so I'm praying with all my might that when I attack Alphaden pack and take him down, giving my wonderful packland to thrive on and ending what I started on that beach. Yes, I did still plan to go through with it. I sighed and continued to scrub my body with the crystal clear water being sprayed down on me. I sighed in delight quietly with a soft smile on my lips. I wrapped my arms around my chest area, making my boobs turn to cleavage and a shiver to run down my spine in delight of the warmth. I leant against the white tiles with my back against the cool material, letting my back slide down the wall slowly till my butt hit the floor and my legs were brought up to my chest. The jet still blew down on my tiny figure crouched in the corner of the shower. I brought my hand back up to my left thigh and ran my fingers along the scar that my mate left behind when he found another girl. That was the final straw for me that day. He may have come and found me when I had first left, but I guess his affection didn't stretch as far to try and find me again. I mean, that's what most mates would do. I let out a whimper and wrapped my tail on top of my feet and around till it curled back around my backside so it kept me warm. Showers were a great place to think and show emotion. It was a place that I knew no one would find me because no one was as rude enough to barge in on someone while they're bathing, and since the jets of water are so loud it drowns out your tears or whimpers with the sound of parading water. I slowly climbed back to my feet in all my without clothes glory until my little NOB thing, so the shower turned off and the millions of droplets soon turned into a couple of water droplets that fell from the head of the shower to the tiled floor. I stepped out quietly, making sure my feet were as quiet as possible. It was a habit I had grown accustomed to, since I would prefer the men to not know I just got out of the shower and be stark without clothes in my room. Wrapping the old red towel around my body, I tucked the end of the towel in between my breasts so I didn't have to continue to hold the towel and it won't fall down. As I was walking out of the bathroom, I gave sidelong glance at the mirror that had been covered in fog and mist from the hot shower. My figure in the mirror was fuzzy, my features barely even being able to be made out. I shook my tail and I watched the grey in the mirror move. Twitching my ears, I watched the grey that sat on top of the black move quickly in fast motions. Next I gazed into my eyes. It was clear as day that I could see that one of my eyes were grey, the other a captivating red. A feeling of fire began racing over my body as I continued to stare at the red in the fuzzy mirror, the feeling a mild tingle as it began to shift into a burning blaze. Since I was bathing, I didn't want to have a chance of destroying that eyechar that Jenny had given me. Looking at the sink, I saw the little eyechar sitting on the edge of the sink, the moon pattern still there, clear as day and as beautiful as ever. I grabbed it fast and threw it over my messed up eye. I didn't enjoy the look of it one bit, and having it made me feel better. When my could be seen, I felt this burning sensation in my chest and my body felt overcome with power and energy that I didn't feel I could control even if I tried. I gasped as the sensation went away instantly as the eyechar made contact with my eye, making sure the world couldn't see its ugliness. I grilled the sink, with my hands facing the tile floor. As the sensation fell away, the feeling of power and energy gone, leaving me feeling slightly drained and dizzy. I shook my head once and held it, with my hand gripping my hair and the fur of my ear in the process of trying to get the wave of dizziness out of my head. The feeling went away as soon as it came and I pushed myself off the sink and out of the bathroom. I shoved the oak door open, walking quietly into my room and grabbing my newly washed clothes and placing them on along with my daggers placed around my waist. It was the black outfit that the moon goddess had given me. It was still as clean and gorgeous as the day she gave it to me. The attack team would begin moving out in a few minutes, and I knew I had to join them if they wanted a chance of getting in the territory alive. The storm was closing in and it gave me the perfect chance to attack that bastardade and get rid of my disgusting family forever, with minimal deaths on our side. This pack had been trained for war 16 hours a day with 6 hours sleep and only 2 hours of downtime for eating and maybe entertainment. Even though I'm glad the old alpha of this pack had trained a group so well, it makes me sad that he even trained children as young as Jenny for war when they had barely even successfully shifted first. Shaking the thoughts away from my head, I pushed the door open quickly, walking briskly down the familiar concrete halls. Then out the front where my army waited for me, in the field many different people already shifted or waiting to shift. "I'm coming. Get your ass ready, Aiden," I whispered to myself. I left the hideout with a confident stride, my eyes twinkling in desire. My army followed close behind me as we closed in on the pack grounds of Moonrise. Chapter 28, Final Battle. All of my wolves walked alongside me, their positions never once faltering. All wolves walked ahead of me while I stayed behind everyone so I could make a quick and hasty way to Alpha Aiden's office. I walked behind everyone in my black combat boots, black skinny jeans and my black singlet, my daggers tucked safely in its holders. My black hair whipped around me in the furious storm breeze. My tail was flowing behind me and my ears were pointed straight up, searching through the winter breeze, trying to find any danger. The stars and moon were placed above us, every once in a while poking through the black clouds to show their support for our attack. Pack house in sight. Nathan stood at the front of the group, him pretending to be the alpha. I went and found Dent so I could finish this. Perfect. If I don't make it, the alpha position is yours, go. I quickly shut the link before Nathan could protest and give me words of encouragement, telling me I wouldn't die. How I will live on to be a great alpha and blah. Blah, blah. All my wolves in front of me ran out onto the field next to the pack house. Familiar growls and barks filling the air, showing the plan was in motion. I internally smirked as I watched the blood splatter against the grass and the sounds of the enemy wolves falling in their final breaths being taken as a crack resounded, signaling that my pack was winning. The smell of these packed grounds sent my mind into a frenzy of memories, filling my brain before I could stop it. The pain that filled my soul. I remembered this place was torturous, and it made me physically hold my head as visions were set on replay for infinity. What dulled the pain was imagining each of the people I hated the most die, in so much detail that it would give adults nightmares and children heart attacks. Ripping my step-siblings' bodies apart, each one agonizing slow. Their constant pleas as they claimed they had nothing to do with anything my parents did to me, but I would merely pretend I didn't speak and watch as the light flashed through their eyes. Then the music would start and I would begin listening to my so-called parents' wails as their perfect children were killed in front of them. Their blood would begin to splatter against my black outfit as their final breaths would be taken. Their gurgles and gasps as a pathetic attempt to use those final words they had the chance to say to tell my parents something cliché like, "I love you" or "thank you for saving us." Their now limp bodies laying on the floor, forever growing pool of blood as their skin turned pale. Eyes shut and the blood stopped pumping in their veins. After that I picture my father running straight for me, his familiar blue eyes and blonde hair whipping behind him as he trained his eyes only on me. His mindset on killing me. But before the deed would be done, I would pull my daggers from behind my back, stabbing him straight in the heart. As he gasped and cried out in pain that, I would slowly lean into his ear and whisper softly so that only me and him could hear, "You thought I was too pathetic to be beta. Look at what I've done now." He would look at me with dead, cold eyes that I had grown accustomed to and try to come back at me with something better, would have already slowed down to no beats at all, and his limp corpse would fall to the ground. A pool of blood surrounding his corpse. My mother would be in agonizing pain as she kneeled on the ground holding her body together from breaking. Then I would walk slowly towards her, watching as she pleaded for me to stop and think of how I shouldn't do this to my family. In the end I would still beat her so she knew how it felt to be abused. Then I would grasp her hair and pull her so she would face me so I could say the couple of words I've always wanted to tell her: "My mother died when I was born." Then slicing her throat so for the rest of eternity she would have to recite those words in her mind as she hung from chains and bars in hell for her crimes against the world. But finally my favorite bit would be when I would walk across the battlefield, my thoughts strained on my old Alpha, as I made my way to kill him in his very office that he so often trained, raped and beat me. I would storm into his room, finding his ugly fat body attempting to climb through the hidden room behind the bookshelf, attempting to spare himself instead of helping his pack members that were dying out on the battlefield. Ripping him from the hole, I would watch his eyes fill with fear as he attempted to consult with me, bargaining for his life. After his attempts would fail, he would try to kill me, but I would only laugh in his face, telling him how he trained me to kill Alphas. His body broken and bruised as he accepted fate. Then with a large smile playing on my face, I would grab Aiden by his shirt, doing further beatings to attempt and match what he did to me. Finally, after he almost entered death, I would bring his face close to mine and rip his fat and ugly head off his pathetic excuse for a body, and smiling as I realized the people that ruin my life are finally gone. Visions over. It was a perfect. The visions in my mind made me smile a crazed smile, and my tail wag at the thought of bathing in our enemy's blood. A familiar smell wafted through my nostrils and I sprung into action, running through the fields of blood and wolves. The sounds and smells comforting every living fiber in my body and making me even less sane than I was before. I knew I was becoming mentally unstable. My mind was so set on revenge and watching their blood spill, or I forgot my sanity a while ago, and now I'm an empty shell of the girl I was when I was with Ash. I shook my head from those thoughts. He was a bastard that finished the job in making me this way. I was already destroyed and mentally unstable, but he just had to push the limits, and look where it got me now. Running through a field of fighting wolves with daggers in my hand, ready to stab the man that assisted with my creation. I immediately recognized his wolf, the way his blonde coat shimmered in the breeze, making his dazzling blue eyes pop with an intensity like no other. But I didn't stay focused on how he looked for long as I watched his wolf prepare for a death bite to no other than Jenny, her wolf body, fighting anymore. I told her to stay behind. I growled in annoyance but sprinted forward anyway, refusing to let the girl I was meant to protect die in front of my eyes. I collided with his body, my arms crossing over my chest, my daggers facing down and my hands guarding my face and neck as my legs rose into my body so I was like a cannonball. My added werewolf speed and vampire speed combined, it was as if I was a bullet. I was successful as I hit my target. I rolled across the grass, putting myself in a crouching position as I kept my eyes on my wolf, which was only just realizing what had happened and getting out of his dazed state. On the other hand, I watched as Jenny finally stumbled to her paws. Her eyes focused on mine as she already realized what she was in for when we finished this battle. But I surprised her as I gave her a small smirk, winking her way as I watched my father finally get to his paws, his eyes landing on mine as he realized that I was back. I heard Jenny scamper off, continuing with the fighting, but my ears and tail stayed still and tense as I watched my father's wolf closely. He was facing me, his cold eyes unchanging as he stared at me with disgust, and I returned the look with an icy eye-ness and glare that he could never comprehend. I've waited for this moment for so long. I told him, my eyes still trained on his. He was taken aback when I first spoke, his ears shooting up a little more, probably checking if he heard right. But when he realized I did speak, his wolf smirked at me and my father shifted into the man I have loathed all these years. Omega. He spat out with so much decency you could probably see it in the air. But I focused on his body as he stood there. Even as I stood in front of him in my full outfit and nightjar over my Iwajiki Fiskar, and he paid no attention to it. As if it didn't surprise him that I did have a scar over my eye. I see you were finally accepted into a worthless rogue pack. What's your status? The power is lapping off you as if you were a beta. I smirked as he looked at me with disapproval and disgust. It only fueled my rage. I'm actually an alpha, for your information. I told him, and he gave me a small fake smile as if showing he didn't actually care, but he was surprised at what I've accomplished. I've also learnt the reason for my mutation is that I'm part vampire. He visibly tensed at this, not meeting my eyes. I knew that he was getting angry. He was the type of person to be a great fighter and not let his emotions get in the way. But when they did, he lashed out, losing all focus on the battle at hand. I'm guessing Mum is my vampire side. I perked up, standing from my crouched position but still keeping a firm grip on my daggers. He finally met my eyes. His cold eyes, as if the mere presence of my being made his body sick. You learnt a lot while you were away. Let me guess, you also found your mate. The mere mention of Ash made my heart race and memories of when he rejected me flashed through my mind. But I shook it off, keeping a good poker face, hoping he didn't see through my act. My father suddenly bright and his eyes going wider and a broad smirk appearing on his face. He did it, didn't he? He spoke, but I made sure not to falter as he held my gaze. That just proves the fact that you're a worthless piece of shit. He must have seen through your acts and realized you're a weak and doubly mutated bitch that never was meant to walk this earth. Me and Kate should have just killed you at birth. I collapsed to the ground on my knees, but I still weakly held onto my daggers, using whatever fight that was left in me to not let my guard down. I was hyperventilating before I could stop it, and the familiar black surrounding my eyes told me I was about to black out. You're the same pathetic girl that you were when you lived here. I'm ashamed to say I'm actually related to you. My father screamed so loudly, even over my heavy breathing, I could hear him. He raised his hand, his claws out, as he slashed his hand across my face, successfully taking off the eyejaw that I wore. It made my eyes blaze with pain and my body wouldn't comprehend anything I tried to do. Gripping my daggers tighter, I stood up in a flash, my body rigged, as I could barely control the laughter that began rocking my body over and over. I faced the grass, wanting to build the tension before I unleashed my power, hoping that my father will today fear me instead of me fearing him. My body absorbed the words he spoke, and the pain of having the eyejaw did to me as my red eye faced my father, blazing with fury. I had just literally broken. My sanity was lost. I looked at him, my eyes wide, my smile broad, showing off my teeth. One of my ears had flopped down, the other tense and straight. My tail was behind me all the while, still and like a damp cloth forced to be dragged along with me. That's why I'm here today. I yelled out, my laughter making it harder to speak. I'm here to prove myself. I screamed at him. His body was now tense as he watched me, only now realizing that he had pushed the limits. I was watching as his eyes grew wider as I looked at him. I finally raised my left dagger to him, pointing it straight at him as I made my eyes seem as if I was taking aim. To do that, I'm going to have to kill the people that ever doubted me. I screamed a warrior cry as I ran towards the man that was meant to be my father. He looked petrified as I did, his eyes widening so far I thought they would pop out of his skull. That would be a beautiful sight. He quickly recollected himself when I had reached about a meter in front of him. He shifted into his blonde wolf, baring his teeth at me as I drew closer. He ran for me as well, ready to plant a bite as soon as his jaws got close enough. Though I jumped over his, stumbling from kicking his butt so he fell into the ground. He growled at me as he recollected himself, his eyes so full of hatred that even though I was insane I could feel them boring into my mind. In return I ran for him and he did as well. Then using my speed to my advantage as he ran closer, I dived down underneath his large body, quickly twisting myself. I faced his underbelly and with both my daggers stabbed them into his stomach as he ran. The blood was like a waterfall. He finished running over me and I stood up soon after,丨Wolf as it whimpered in the pain I have inflicted on him. He was just as disgusting as I was to him. He looked like a pup who had only first received a wound and waited for it to heal. Adult wolves are bold and don't let pain affect their battles. But my father wasn't a wolf, he was a mere pup playing a big wolf's game. I never knew you were so easy to beat, Dad. I yelled like a little schoolgirl, a childish chuckle at the end. He was infuriated and turned to come at me again. But I waited. When he was close, I dived, just pointed in front of me, ready to plant into his skull. He was at too much of a high speed to dodge or attack, and his emotions didn't help either as he used them to blindside him to his death. My daggers went straight into his skull, in between the wolf's eyes, as blood began to spurt everywhere around me. His wolf-christened whimpers were the only thing heard for miles. The warm crimson liquid flowed onto my whole body, the feeling oddly comforting. Soon my father's eyes turned dull and lifeless, the once cold eyes now filled with nothing. A void of emotion. Those eyes that I once loathed and had to face every single day were officially gone and never to return. What made me realize I had truly killed him was hearing a tortured screech reside to the fight. The scream belonging to a female. I smirked as I pulled the dagger from my father's corpse, letting it collapse to the floor in one big heap. The tortured scream continued to rip through the air, and it made me know the exact location of the woman who gave birth to me. I ran through the fight, more blood splattering over my already soaked outfit. My thoughts were on my mother and how I heard her deathly scream that could only come from the pain of losing your mate. I'm glad I would never have to feel pain like that. My mate was gone and I planned on never seeing him again. Running through the field of tortured cries and howls of pain sent an exhilarating feeling through my body that could only be brought by doing something that you truly loved. My ears listened intently to what was happening around me. My tail was flapping in the breeze, my legs pumping themselves to go faster, and my hands twitched with excitement as they held my daggers firmly. The feeling grew as I came to the part of the field where my so-called mother laid in a crumpled heap on the ground, clutching herself together as sobs racked her body intensely. "Why?" She sobbed quietly as war continued to rage on around her. "You thought I was weak," I told her, gazing down at her with such hatred and distaste. She heard me and gasped, turning around to see her grown-up torturing her like a hawk as she broke down into tears. I smirked as I saw the fear replace the sadness in her eyes. "What are you doing in here?" she asked, gazing up from the ground, her blotchy red eyes looking straight into my grey and red ones. "Revenge, sweet mother." Father went down easily, stabbed him straight in between the eyes. I told her, a little chuckle on the end of my sentence as my eyes grew wider and my smile grew broader. My tail shook behind me in the light of the battle, and my ears continued to twitch and listen to every little harsh breath my mother took. "Why, ooh." Why, she screamed in my face, her tears continuing to run down her cheeks like a waterfall. "Why?" I asked, lightly turning away and watching the battlefield with a smile on my face. "Because every day I was breaking. But now, I'm broken and insane." I turned around quickly to my mother, using my wolf speed to go straight up to her crippled figure in the ground, placing the blade of my dagger under her chin so she was forced to look into my eyes, so killing everyone that assisted in destroying me and I alongside my soul. I told her quickly, a chuckle leaving my lips. She continued to sob as she looked at me, her gaze quickly looking behind me, then back into my eyes with a newfound courage in them. Her eyes grew harsher as she looked at me, her frown turning into a grimace as she stared at me. "You deserved everything he did. You're a worthless bitch that has no purpose." Leaning in closer to my mother's ear, I whispered softly, "Thanks for the vampire side. Your kids will meet you in hell." Her eyes were wide and fearful as she gazed at the kids behind me. She knew I knew that they were there and going to attack. So with her final breath she spoke, "You're a worthless mistake." Then I used my dagger to slit her throat, blood splattering onto my face, my mouth filling with the delicious sweetness of my mother's blood, which I immediately drank, the warm liquid gliding down my throat. Sighing in relief, I turned around to see the twins' wolves staring at me wide-eyed. The girl looked as if she was about to break into tears, her brown wolf whimpering quietly as her yellow eyes filled with tears at the loss of her mother. The boy's wolf looked as if he could murder me 700 times over, the black in his eyes going over the brown as he grew even more angry as his wolf took control, his dark brown fur shaking with tamed anger. I could understand why they wanted to kill me. I looked at the two pitiful wolves. She deserved to die. Don't worry, I'll make yours quicker. And with that I ran ahead, running in between the wolves and plunging my dagger into each of their heads. My right dagger going straight through the boy's skull and the left going straight through the girl's skull. Thrusting the blades out fast, their corpses tumbled to the floor in a big heap, blood pooling fast as the blood mixed under my black boot. I turned to the pack house, searching for the fast heartbeat and shaky breaths of the old alpha that trained me this way. Thump, thump. I smirked to myself, knowing he had already gone to his secret bunker in his office, his wimpy self too afraid to fight the fight that he knew was done by me. Here I come, Aiden.